when Pam Bondi unleashed a wave of entitled accusations against Prime Minister Mark Carney at an international summit, blasting Canada's trade negotiations and defense posture. She believed her righteous fury would shake the room. But in a devastating counterstrike, Carney dismantled her narrative, leaving the global press corps in stunned silence. Before the gloves come off, drop a comment. Do you stand with Carney or Bondi? Subscribe now. This is not just politics. This is war. The Geneva summit was never designed to feel warm. Everything about it screamed power and precision, from the black-suited guards with coiled earpieces to the frosted glass podiums arranged in a semicircle like a royal tribunal. The scent of expensive perfume and anxiety hung in the air. Reporters flanked the velvet ropes, cameras already aimed, mics armed like weapons. Canada's flag waved softly between those of the US, Japan, and the EU. Underneath it all, the real war was about to begin, and then the double doors at the rear creaked open. Pam Bondi entered like she owned the damn place. Hair perfect, heels sharper than her press statements. She walked like someone who never questioned her place in the room, not even for a second. She moved past the cameras with a tilt of her head and the faintest smirk, as if the entire summit were just another courtroom where she already knew the verdict. The American entourage trailed behind her, trying to match her tempo but failing. She did not need them. Pam Bondi didn't follow. She commanded. Time to teach the Canadians a little lesson in power, she thought, her heels clicking like clockwork across the marble. Let's see if Carney still smiles when the numbers are against him. She reached the podium with the confidence of a general, scanned the room and spoke without waiting for silence. There was no warm-up, just war. Let us be honest about what we're witnessing, she began, her voice slicing through the room like ice water. Canada's so-called resistance to American tariffs is not strategy. It is a tantrum. Prime Minister Carney's posturing is a smokescreen for weakness. The United States drives global security. We power the economy, and we set the terms. No hesitation, no filter, just fire. A few journalists whispered. One Canadian official stiffened in his chair. The Japanese trade advisor stopped typing. Mark Carney, she continued, is not a visionary. He is a globalist puppet reciting polite slogans while freeloading off American power. His talk of Canada first is a hollow slogan from a country that's always been second. And, let us be real, without U.S. defense, U.S. markets, and U.S. fuel corridors, Canada is a nice postcard with a broken engine. Boom, she dropped it like a legal hammer. Behind her, a digital screen flipped to a red bar graph. U.S. exports rising, Canadian GDP dipping. She turned slightly and gestured toward it, as if to say, I rest my case. Carney wants a headline? Here it is. Canada folds, America leads. The silence that followed was radioactive. CBC's lead journalist clenched his pen like a dagger. A BuzzFeed reporter texted something furiously. A French minister narrowed his eyes. Even the CNN crew looked up from their phones, but across the stage, Mark Carney did not flinch. He sat still, his navy suit crisp, tie-centered, posture perfect. His hands were folded neatly on the desk. His eyes met Bondi's for only a second, but in that second, he saw everything. The performance, the arrogance, the pressure behind her eyes. Carney didn't speak. He didn't need to. Not yet. Let her burn herself out, he thought. I'll speak when it counts. The moderators at the table exchanged awkward glances. One flipped a cue card, another reached for water. The room was still holding its breath, hanging on the tension, waiting for Mark Carney to rise, waiting to see if he would take the hit and retreat, or walk into the storm and flip the script. For a full 10 seconds, Mark Carney did not move. The silence thickened, then turned sharp. Cameras zoomed in. Journalists clutched pens like weapons. Pam Bondi stood tall, arms crossed, waiting for her punchline to land. But Carney simply stood, slowly, deliberately. He reached for his notes and untouched, then let them rest. He did not need them. He adjusted his jacket with surgical calm, exhaled once, then stepped to the podium. His voice, steady, low, controlled. Let us deal in facts, he said, not looking at Bondi. Not fear. The tone wasn't loud, but it sliced. The kind of voice that does not need to rise because the room is already leaning in. Pam blinked. The smirk faded, just slightly. Carney continued, eyes on the crowd. Canada does not measure strength in slogans. We measure it in delivery, in supply, in partnership. This summit was called to discuss global trade, not to audition for cable news soundbites. A low murmur rolled through the back rows. A French minister nodded slowly. A Reuters reporter mouthed, "Wow," to no one in particular. Carney turned toward the main screen and gestured to the map now displayed. North America's energy grid, oil pipelines, uranium routes, hydroelectric corridors. The United States imports 20% of its crude oil from Canada, he said. That oil flows directly to your refineries, in Texas and Illinois in the Midwest. He clicked the next slide. We supply over 70% of your uranium, fueling your nuclear plants from Arizona to New York. Another slide. Hydroelectric, exports from Quebec to New England. Our power lights your cities. Our logistics stabilize your economy. Carney looked out over the crowd. This is not dependency. This is partnership. And when that partnership is mocked, it must be clarified. Pam shifted her weight. She opened her mouth, but Carney raised a hand lightly, not as interruption but as authority. The moderator let him continue. Let us talk about facts, he repeated, not headlines. He paused. A small glass of water waited beside him. He did not touch it. Yesterday, he said calmly, Canada finalized a memorandum of energy cooperation with the European Union. Effective immediately, we are increasing oil and natural gas exports to EU ports. Rotterdam, Hamburg, Marseille, and Japan, he added, has confirmed a 15% rise in Canadian oil imports over the next quarter. Silence, then rapid scribbles. Journalists exploded into motion. Pam Bondi's smile tightened like a crack under pressure. So, Carney said softly, if the United States chooses to weaponize trade, Canada will not fold. We will pivot. One EU advisor leaned toward a colleague. Did he just say they're already rerouting exports? A Bloomberg correspondent typed so fast his fingers blurred. A Canadian outlet's live stream chat exploded. Let's go! Carney just buried her. Global chess, not checkers. Pam stepped forward. Her voice jumped in, louder now. So you're abandoning the U.S. market? That's what you're saying? She snapped. Carney turned to face her directly for the first time. His tone didn't change. No, Miss Bondi, I am saying we are not your hostage. Boom. A Wall Street Journal reporter looked up slowly, almost reverently. Our exports to the United States remain important, Carney continued, but not irreplaceable. Not when there are nations willing to work with respect, not threats. The room had shifted. Bondi looked left, then right, but found no support. You know these deals will not replace America, she barked. You need us more than you admit. Carney didn't flinch. And yet your gas prices are rising, he said calmly. 10% in 3 weeks, if your Department of Energy statistics are still accurate, while Canadian ports are busier than ever. The twist was landing, hard. An EU energy official turned to a Japanese diplomat. Both nodded almost instinctively. Behind them, a quiet murmur built like a distant drum. Pam reached for the podium, her hand trembling for half a second. She masked it by shifting her notes. This is reckless, she snapped. You're playing with people's lives. Carney finally took his glass of water. A pause, a sip, then the dagger. Leadership is not about pleasing headlines, it is about protecting people. That includes the millions of Canadians who depend on fair trade, and the Americans who now see their gas stations charging $5 a gallon. Reporters were now typing full sentences they didn't need to edit. They knew what they were witnessing. This wasn't a debate. It was a dismantling, one-sided, surgical, controlled, and Pam Bondi for the first time in the summit was quiet. The moderator's voice broke through. We'll now open the floor to questions. The real war had just begun. Pam Bondi hated the silence. Not just any silence. This silence. The kind that follows a blow you didn't see coming. The kind that lands in your stomach before it reaches your ears. She scanned the press gallery again. Less nodding, fewer smirks. One Axios reporter was clearly tweeting. 2 French aides were whispering. Definitely not about her. No, no. Control the narrative, she told herself. Shift the ground beneath him. She stepped forward again, leaning on the podium now. Let us not pretend Canada does not owe its security to the United States, she said, her voice sharper now, teeth just beneath the surface. Our military spending, our defense systems, our nuclear shield, it covers your skies, your borders. The American taxpayer carries the weight, while Canada cashes the peace dividend. She turned slightly, gesturing to the Canadian delegation, seated just behind Carney. You do not pay your share. You never have. And if you cannot, maybe it's time to rethink just how independent you really are. A few reporters looked up. Fox News tilted its camera slightly. The crowd murmured, tension creeping back in. Carney stood still, calm. Defense, he thought. Now she's grasping. He walked back to the mic. No notes again. He did not need them. Respectfully, Miss Bondi, he began. Your claims are as outdated as they are inaccurate. Pam blinked. Carney continued, precise, measured, and smooth as ever. Canada is the only country that shares command of NORAD with the United States. Our military doesn't just cooperate when we co-lead. Our Arctic operations are essential to continental security. No U.S. satellite reaches the pole without our radar. No northern threat is detected without our watch. And per capita, he added, Canada spends more on NATO operations than many European nations. Pause. Let it sink. This is not charity. This is cooperation. And it is something we value, not exploit. Now the contrast was undeniable. Pam Bondi, voice rising, interruptions, emotional. Mark Carney, low, lethal, unstoppable. A New York Times reporter whispered to her colleague, he's absolutely eating her alive, and he hasn't raised his voice once. Pam clenched her fists, her rebuttal loaded on instinct. Oh please, she spat. Canada is a shield only because we let you be. A few laughs, nervous, not supportive. She realized it too late. It sounded petty, like something said, at the end of an argument you already lost. Carney didn't react. He was already flipping the conversation forward. Canada has deployed troops to every NATO mission in the last 2 decades, he said. From Afghanistan to Ukraine, from peacekeeping to frontline action, we've stood beside our allies. This isn't about payments, it's about presence, and Canada shows up. Boom. The crowd shifted again, this time visibly. CBC journalist adjusted her mic, leaning forward. The BBC team started pulling stills from their footage. Even the Japanese press took new interest. The momentum had moved, and it wasn't coming back. Pam tried one last angle. Well then, maybe the real question is, how long can Canada keep pretending it doesn't need America? Carney didn't miss a beat. Miss Bondi, he said softly, the real question is, when did partnership become something to be mocked? Silence. A long one. Not hostile. Just done. Carney stepped away from the podium. Not rushed. Not triumphant. Just finished. Like a chess player who knows the game is over even if the clock is still running. Pam stood there, frozen, stiff, hands now flat on the sides of the podium. Her jaw clenched. This was not how it was supposed to go. Reporters were already typing headlines. Carney dismantles Bondi in real time. From entitlement to silence. Calm kills chaos. The Canadian response. Her voice tried to return, like an old engine choking on its own smoke. Let us see how long your partnerships last when real threats come knocking, she snapped. When missiles fly or borders break, do not expect America to guard yours for free. The line was designed to sting. It didn't. No gasps. No applause. Just a Fox reporter frowning like even they didn't want to quote that one. Carney didn't turn around. He stood still, a quiet mountain in the storm. But inside, that was her last play, he thought. And she knows it. The summit room had shifted. The air felt different, heavier, like the press corps knew they weren't just witnessing a debate anymore. They were watching a global rebalancing. Pam Bondi leaned back, arms crossed, eyes sharp. But something had changed. Her voice was still firm, but her posture, less lioness, more cornered. Carney returned to the podium, calm, unshaken, and now bolder. Let us widen the lens, he said. This is not a question of Canada versus the United States. This is about how nations, proud independent nations, adapt in the face of coercion. Yesterday, he continued, Canada formalized an alliance with the European Union, Japan, and Australia to expand joint energy security. This is not hypothetical. This is already underway. Reporters perked up. Carney clicked to the next slide, a map glowing with red and green nodes. Halifax and Vancouver ports are now exporting liquefied natural gas to Tokyo Bay and Yokohama. Our oil from Alberta is arriving in Rotterdam and Hamburg. Quebec's hydroelectric grid is connecting with European demand through direct agreements signed this week. He paused, then dropped the real line. Canada does not just supply resources. We now direct flows. Boom! An EU delegate tapped the table, subtle, approving. The Japanese finance official nodded, arms folded across his chest. Even the Australian trade minister cracked a grin. Carney wasn't just responding anymore. He was leading. Pam tried to laugh. She leaned toward her mic, clearly searching for momentum. Canada? She scoffed. You're not a superpower, you're a supplier. The idea that you're leading anything is just diplomatic fan fiction. Carney didn't respond. He didn't need to, because the room did it for him. A Belgian official whispered something to a German rep. A Japanese reporter scribbled a headline, "Canada's Quiet Rise, from Middle Power to Global Player." And then it landed. The twist. A Bloomberg reporter stood up, holding his phone. "We've just received a leaked memo from the U.S. Department of Energy," he announced. "Internal estimates project U.S. gasoline prices will rise by another 12% if Canadian oil exports remain redirected to Europe and Asia." The room froze. Cameras turned. Mics lifted. Heads whipped toward Carney, then slowly toward Bondi. Her jaw clenched. She hadn't seen that one coming. "Is that accurate, Prime Minister?" asked an EU reporter. Carney looked right at Bondi. "I cannot speak for leaked American documents," he said with diplomatic chill, "but I can confirm this. Every barrel redirected, every shipment rerouted, was a direct response to economic aggression." He turned back to the audience. "We warned Washington, we warned again, but when partnership was replaced by pressure, we acted." Boom. Another wave of nods. Reporters everywhere scribbling like court stenographers on red. Bull, even the Fox News crew looked rattled. One whispered to the anchor, "They're losing this narrative." Pam Bondi was stone, hands stiff. She reached for a water bottle but missed the cap. "So you're punishing the American people?" she said, voice tight. Carney paused. He stepped forward. "No," he said, "we're protecting ours. And as it turns out, protecting our economy does not mean isolation. It means innovation. Our alliance is not symbolic, it's functional, it's moving ships, it's shifting markets, it's rewriting the rules." Reporters were now standing in the back rows. An EU diplomat whispered to the Japanese delegate, "This isn't posturing, this is policy." Pam tried to counter again. "You won't survive without us. This alliance, it's temporary. You'll come crawling back." Carney didn't even blink. "Miss Bondi," he said, "Canada is not crawling. We're sailing." The room reacted like a gut punch. A CTV journalist whispered, "That's a t-shirt." The BBC anchor cracked a grin. Even an Australian aide mouthed respect under his breath. Pam looked around. She had lost the room. Even her allies weren't meeting her eyes anymore. She stepped back, face taut, expression unreadable. She was looking for her next angle, her next strike, but the narrative had run away from her. She was no longer steering the conversation. She was being pulled behind it. "We're done pretending we're small," Carney added. "The world sees us, and now we see ourselves." The final image of the act, Pam Bondi, isolated at the podium. Canada, at the center of a shifting world. Pam Bondi knew the ground had shifted. The room had turned, not loud, not chaotic, but silent in that terrifying way where everyone knows who just lost. But she was not done, not yet. She stepped forward again, sharper now, desperate, teeth barely veiled behind every word. "Do you really think your alliances will protect you?" she hissed. "You've redirected oil, you've made speeches, fine, but let me tell you what happens next." Her voice had lost its rhythm. Too fast, too forced. "Your people will pay, your families will pay. Gas prices, inflation, instability. You'll crawl back to Washington begging, because Canada cannot stand alone." The room tensed. That line, "your people will pay," was meant to intimidate, but it landed like a low blow in a noble fight, and Mark Carney felt it. He did not blink. He stepped forward slowly, not defensive, not angry, but anchored. "You just made it about them," he said quietly. "So let us talk about them." He placed both hands on the podium. No slides, no stats, no screen, just truth. "Let us talk about the oil workers in Alberta, who wake up at 4 a.m. to keep our pipelines running in -30 snowstorms. Let us talk about the First Nations communities in Saskatchewan, who've protected our land for generations, and now protect our energy corridors with wisdom the world barely understands. Let us talk about the single mother in Halifax raising 3 kids on a nurse's salary, who kept her hospital running during the worst days of the pandemic, without applause, without rest. Let us talk about the farmers in Prince Edward Island whose hands are cracked from decades of work, feeding families they'll never meet." His voice did not rise, but the power in it swelled. A CBC reporter dabbed her eyes with her sleeve. A Japanese minister stared silently. One of the French aides actually stopped taking notes. Carney breathed in, not for drama but to center himself. "We do not crawl, we do not beg, we endure." He turned to Bondi now, squarely. Because unlike your vision of leadership, ours is not built on threat or force. It's built on people, real people, who do not fold under pressure. They rise through it. Pam stood still, jaw locked, but her hands now gripped the sides of her podium, white-knuckled. Her team behind her exchanged hushed, nervous words. One aide glanced toward the exit, but Carney was still rising. In World War II, he said, our soldiers stormed Juno Beach beside yours, without hesitation. During the pandemic, every province coordinated supply chains, not for credit, but for survival. In this crisis, premiers across political lines, liberal, conservative, independent, stood shoulder to shoulder. Why? Because we do not need permission to be united. The summit hall was silent, not from awkwardness but reverence. This was no longer a debate, it was a defining moment. This fight, Carney said, his voice softening now, is not about energy, or tariffs, or diplomacy. It's about dignity, and Canada will not give that up. Not to tariffs, not to pressure, and certainly not to threats. A Toronto Star journalist stopped recording and just listened. A CTV camera operator muttered under his breath, he's not speaking to her anymore. He's speaking to all of us. Pam tried to jump back in. You talk big, she snapped, but your people are still struggling. Your economy isn't bulletproof. Carney looked toward the Canadian delegation. Every face was still, present, rooted. No one is bulletproof, he said, but we are battle-tested. And there it was, the final transformation. Not the economist, not the diplomat, but the protector. From the quiet, calculating technician into the man carrying a country on his back. He stepped away from the podium, hands by his sides, head high. The audience sat stunned, no applause yet, just the weight of his words echoing through the glass and stone. Pam Bondi remained at the podium, frozen, her face unreadable, but her silence louder than anything she could say. Even her usual press allies, Axios, Wall Street Journal, The Post, were no longer taking her side, not even in their eyes. She looked toward the moderators, perhaps for a lifeline. None came. Carney had just shifted the narrative from oil and trade to identity, from gas prices to sacrifice, from numbers to nationhood, and Pam was out of moves. Pam standing silent, surrounded by a press corps that now only wants to ask him questions, and Carney already turning away because his work here is done. The tension had faded, not broken, resolved. Pam Bondi stood stiff, lips tight, her hands still gripping the podium like it was the last thing tethering her to control. The room around her buzzed, but none of it belonged to her anymore. Reporters whispered not to each other, but to their editors. Cameras were no longer fixed on her, and the story being written now was not hers. Mark Carney had already stepped away. His shoulders relaxed for the first time in hours, but as he reached the edge of the stage, his foot paused mid-step. He turned, slowly, deliberately, eyes calm, posture straight, face unreadable, the kind of expression you wear when you know you won. He looked toward the moderators, then Pam, then right into the cameras. Canada will trade, he said, voice calm and clear, but we will not kneel. The room froze. Again, no gasps. Just gravity. Ottawa's door is open, he continued, but the terms are ours. He let the words hang, just long enough, and then, the twist, the smile, the most Canadian flex of all, and before I go, he paused, eyebrows lifted, smirk rising. Anyone for a Tim Hortons? For a beat? No one moved, no one breathed, and then, laughter exploded. The EU diplomat broke first, a chuckle that turned into a full-throated laugh. A Japanese minister slapped the table. The French press corps, usually emotionless, grinned like kids in on a good joke. One Canadian reporter actually clapped. The CTV anchor leaned back and whispered, "Legend." Even a Wall Street Journal analyst muttered, "That line's going viral in 10 minutes. Pam, still frozen, still silent. Her eyes tracked him like she wanted to say something, anything, but nothing came. She didn't have a counter, not for facts, not for alliances, and definitely not for a double-double. Carney turned again, for real this time, and exited with the kind of stride that says mission accomplished. His aides followed without a word. They didn't need to speak. The work was done. Behind him the crowd hummed with energy. Microphones swung toward the Canadian delegation. Reporters called out questions. The room had moved on. Pam Bondi stood alone. At the podium, no applause, no redemption, just silence, and the sound of history rolling past her. News camera zooms in on the Tim Hortons line from Carney. already trending. Double diplomacy. Tim Hortons wins, Carney crushes, and as the press scrambles to chase the Canadian Prime Minister down the hall for quotes, one CTV reporter turns to the camera half laughing, half saluting. Carney came for policy, but he left with a clean sweep, a standing ovation, and possibly the best mic drop in summit history. The summit may have ended, but the internet was just waking up. Within minutes of Mark Carney's final words echoing across Geneva Hall, and his Tim Hortons joke detonating like a polite Canadian nuke, the digital world exploded. Hashtags tore through social media, silenced by Carney, trending #1 in Canada and #3 globally. Bondi breakdown, a favorite among Twitter's political junkies. Conseils Tim Hortons wins, the most memeable retweeted remixed phrase of the week. TikTok, political creators started reenacting the moment in full suits, with fake podiums, sipping coffee mid-speech like they were Carney himself. One viral soundbite: Canada will trade, but we will not kneel. Over 1.3 million uses in under 24 hours. Instagram Reels, quick cuts showed Pam's face slowly shifting from smug to stunned, backdropped by dramatic violin music and maple leaf overlays. One caption read, "When the substitute teacher brings actual facts." YouTube Shorts montages of the speech went live. Carney's mic drop moment turned into a 10-second remix with fireworks and a dubstep beat. One viral title, "He didn't raise his voice, he raised the bar." News outlets went into overdrive. CBC, Carney's calm crushes chaos in viral summit moment. The Guardian, global summit turns into the Carney show. CNN, Pam crumbled, and Twitter roared. Fox News, tensions mount over Canada's energy redirection. The Onion, Canada declares victory, demands extra Timbits, and, yes, SNL dropped a sketch that Saturday night. Pam Bondi, played by Kate McKinnon, flailed at a podium yelling, "You'll crawl back to Washington," while Carney, stoic in glasses and sipping a double-double, replied, "We'll sail." The crowd, in hysterics. Reddit's ER World Politics top comment of the day. This was the verbal version of maple syrup poured over a mic drop. But, beyond the memes, beyond the headlines, something deeper landed. For Canadians across the country, from Vancouver's dock workers to Nova Scotia's nurses, the moment hit home. The man who had once been called too quiet, too technical, and too boring, had just outclassed an American fire starter with grace, facts, and national pride. Mark Carney didn't just win an argument. He reminded a nation who they were. When arrogance faces unity, it does not shout, it collapses. When facts meet fury, truth always echoes louder. If you felt that, if you saw your country in those words, comment, hit that like, and share the moment Canada stood tall. Fade out with slow-motion clips of Carney walking past reporters, coffee cup in hand, flag pin glinting on his lapel. Cut to black.